This might surprise you, but the most expensive problem in ancient history wasn't wars themselves. It wasn't bad strategy, weak leaders, or a lack of courage. It was money. More specifically, it was the ability to keep paying the people holding the weapons. Empires didn't collapse because they lost battles. They collapsed because they ran out of cash to pay their armies. And the moment the payments stopped making sense, loyalty vanished faster than any ideology ever could. Welcome to Money Chronicles, where money and history collide. Before banks, income taxes, central banks, or government bonds, every empire faced the same brutal question. How do you keep hundreds of thousands of armed men fed, equipped, and loyal year after year? Soldiers don't fight just for ideas. They fight because they expect something in return: security for their families, status, land, or simply cold, hard pay. And once armies stopped being temporary groups and became permanent institutions, war turned into a payroll problem. Ancient states couldn't just print money. They couldn't run endless deficits. When the treasury ran dry, there was no lender waiting to save them. So every empire had to tie its military power to something real: metal pulled from the ground, land taken by force, or labor squeezed from conquered people. These systems shaped everything: how society worked, who carried the burden, and who suffered when things went wrong. No empire understood this better than Rome. At its peak, Rome maintained an army of about 400,000 men spread across 3 continents. This wasn't just a fighting force, it was a massive institution. Every soldier expected regular pay, retirement benefits, and often land after service. This wasn't generosity, it was the price of keeping the empire together. Rome's borders didn't hold because of patriotism. They held because soldiers were paid, reliably, at least at first. And that pay came in silver. Not promises, not paper, real metal. The denarius, Rome's silver coin, powered the entire empire. Soldiers were paid with it, taxes were collected with it, trade depended on it. Roman authority was literally stamped on every coin. But silver doesn't appear out of nowhere. Rome needed huge amounts of it, and that quietly shaped its expansion. The conquest of Hispania, modern Spain, wasn't just about glory. It was about access to some of the richest silver mines in the world. Those mines didn't just make Rome rich, they paid its soldiers. Rome quite literally dug its army out of the ground. As long as silver flowed, everything worked. Soldiers trusted their pay, merchants accepted the coins, taxes moved smoothly. The army protected trade routes and made sure silver kept circulating. It was a closed loop of power, money, and force. But nature has limits. By the 2nd century, the easy silver was gone. Mining became expensive. Military campaigns cost more. The empire kept growing, but its income didn't keep up. And instead of fixing the real problem, Roman leaders chose the oldest financial trick in history. They watered down the money. The denarius looked the same design, same authority, but slowly, quietly, they reduced the silver inside it. More copper, less silver. On paper, soldiers were still paid the same. In reality, their money bought less and less. At first, no one noticed. Then prices started rising. Merchants demanded more coins. Soldiers complained their pay wasn't enough, so the state raised wages, using even more watered-down coins. That pushed prices higher. Taxes went up, farmers and workers got squeezed. They had no power to negotiate. Inflation didn't show up as a sudden disaster. It crept in slowly. Small decisions. Each one seemed reasonable. Together, they hollowed out the system. The army adapted faster than civilians. Soldiers started demanding bonuses. Emperors who couldn't pay were replaced, sometimes violently, by those who could. Loyalty shifted from the state to whoever controlled the treasury. The army stopped serving Rome. Rome started serving the army. Meanwhile, regular people paid the price. Taxes rose, trade became unstable, savings lost value, trust in money disappeared. What started as a clever fix became a slow transfer of wealth from the population to the armed state. Here's the irony. Rome didn't fall because it abandoned silver. It fell because it depended on it too much. By the 3rd century, the denarius was almost pure copper. Soldiers weren't even paid in money anymore. They were paid in food and land. The economy broke apart. Trust vanished. The empire that once conquered the Mediterranean with silver coins began collapsing under its own payroll. Rome wasn't unique, it was just early. The same pattern repeated across history. Because once you understand how an empire pays its army, you understand who really holds power. And once that system starts cracking, collapse isn't a question of if, only when. When Rome's silver system failed, it fell back on something older and more brutal: land, loot, and promises of future reward. If you can't pay your army with money, you pay it with expansion, but expansion never lasts forever. Other empires learned this the hard way too. The Assyrian Empire paid its soldiers with conquest. Loot, captives, and land were the reward. Cities that resisted were stripped and reorganized to feed the war machine. This wasn't random cruelty, it was economics. War funded itself. But when expansion slowed, everything collapsed. Soldiers used to constant reward had no patience. Rebellion followed. The empire fell apart. Centuries later, early Islamic empires used a more organized system. Soldiers were paid with tax revenue from conquered lands. As long as borders expanded, money flowed. When expansion stopped, the system strained. Taxes rose, unity cracked. Meanwhile, in China, the Han Dynasty built a different model. Soldiers were supported not just with money, but with grain, cloth, and forced labor. Peasants built roads, transported supplies, and filled state storehouses. It worked, but at a huge human cost. Entire populations lived to support wars they would never fight. And then there were empires that paid with people. The Aztecs didn't use salaries. Warriors fought for status and tribute rights. Conquered cities delivered food, materials, and captives. Everything was recorded, organized, bureaucratic. But when tribute stopped, the system collapsed instantly. No buffer, no backup plan. Different civilizations, different tools, same truth. Armies are never paid in ideas. They're paid with something real: metal, land, labor, lives. And whatever that something is ends up shaping the entire society. Now, here's where it gets uncomfortable. We like to think modern states solved this problem. Today, armies are paid with budgets, bonds, and digital money. Wars are funded with debt instead of conquest. But look closer. Military spending is still untouchable. When budgets get tight, social programs are debated. Defense budgets are protected. Inflation quietly shifts the cost onto regular people. Debt replaces tribute. Central banks replace silver mines. Same logic, new tools. Inflation today works just like coin debasement in Rome. It lets governments pay their bills without openly raising taxes. It takes value from savers and workers, and it protects those closest to money creation. Nothing screams stable system like needing invisible tricks to fund the most visible force on Earth. The most dangerous illusion isn't that history repeats itself. It's believing we've outgrown it. Empires don't fall because they lose wars. They fall because paying for power becomes impossible. Collapse doesn't arrive overnight. It arrives slowly. First, trust, then stability, then unity. That's why historical economics isn't boring trivia. It's financial self-defense. Because if you don't understand how money flows to power, if you don't see who gets paid first, if you don't recognize inflation and debt for what they really are, history doesn't need to repeat. You'll feel it anyway, without knowing why. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. History has answers. I'll show you where to look.